Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. The fall light filtered through the windows of the Mallerie's dining room, casting long shadows on the oak table. 45-year-old Orin Mallerie sat at the far end of the table, his posture stiff but composed. His dark eyes, usually warm and keen, became as cold as flint at the moment as he gazed at his wife of 15 years, 43-year-old Bryn. She held a writing pad in her hand, pressed close to her chest, and her russet hair was worn in a tight ponytail that emphasized the sharp angles of her face. "Let's get started," Bryn announced with a fragile smile that didn't reach the bottom of her eyes. "We need to deal with some family concerns." Around the table sat Bryn's family. Her 47-year-old sister, Odessa Harlow, with her perfectly teased blonde hair and timeless expression of discontent. Odessa's husband, 49-year-old Trent Harlow, a man who wore his Ivy League education as a badge of honor and viewed conversations as a competition. Their 17-year-old daughter, Isla, who hadn't looked up since arriving and whose nail-polished fingers kept tapping the screen of her phone, and Bryn's 35-year-old brother, Nolan Pierce, who slouched back in his chair, his tech startup hoodie and his eyes on his phone. Nail-polished fingers tapping the screen of her cell phone. And Bryn's 35-year-old brother, Nolan Pierce, who slouched back in his chair, the tech startup hoodie on him at odds with the calculating look in his eyes. 9-year-old Ellis Mallerie, Orin and Bryn's son, sits next to his father, his small hands fiddling with the wooden puzzle Orin carved for him last Christmas. "I've talked to everyone," Bryn continued, her voice taking on that accent she's used to when she gives fundraising speeches for nonprofit organizations. "And we think it's time to address the discomfort you're causing at your house parties, Orin." Orin's eyebrows raised slightly, the only sign he heard her speak. "You don't engage, you don't communicate, you just sit there and judge us all," Odessa interjected, her words laced with rehearsed concern. "This kid needs a better role model," Nolan added, gesturing absently in Ellis' direction without looking at him. Trent cleared his throat authoritatively. "As the most experienced parent here, you only have one child." Orin spoke for the first time, his voice low and smooth. "I think we need to think about what's best for the whole extended family unit." Trent continued as if Orin hadn't spoken. Isla looked up briefly. "Uncle Orin, it's just super awkward when you're around, like no one can be themselves." Bryn nodded sympathetically to her niece before turning back to the table. "I've prepared a simple resolution. All those in favor of Orin being excluded from future family gatherings until he demonstrates more appropriate social integration, raise your hands." 5 hands immediately went up, Bryn's among them. "Mom," Ellis's voice quivered, her eyes widening in confusion. "What are you doing?" "It's for your own good, baby," Bryn replied without looking at his son. Ellis turned to her father, tears welling up in her eyes. "Dad, why are they doing this?" Orin's face softened as he looked at his son. He reached out a rough hand and gently covered Ellis' smaller one. "Because they don't know the difference between quiet and weak." He stood up slowly, his chair scraping on the hardwood floor. "Take your puzzle, man. We're going to get ice cream. You can't just leave." Bryn snapped. Orin smiled, not the warm smile he left Ellis with, but with something colder. "Actually, I can. You guys just voted me out, remember? Ellis, get your coat." As they walked toward the door, Orin stopped and turned back to look at the table. "You know, I've been taking notes all these years. Every loan, every favor, every maneuver. I just didn't think you guys would make it so easy for me to use them." The door closed softly behind them with a click that somehow felt more final than any violent slam. "Go back a year." Orin stood in his study, meticulously updating the ledger he'd maintained for nearly a decade. The room is a testament to his organized personality. Bookshelves organized by subject and author, a whiteboard with logistics formulas neatly written on it, and a map on the wall marking his company's shipping routes. A knock on the door interrupted his concentration. "The caterer needs 2,000 more for Isla's birthday party," Bryn announced without thinking, leaning against the doorframe. Orin put down his pen. "We've already paid them 5,000. Odessa wants to upgrade to the premium package. It's important to her." "Is it important to her? Or is it important to me to pay for this?" Orin corrected. Bryn's expression went rigid. "They're family, Orin. That's what families do." "Yes." Orin took out his checkbook and started writing. Last month was an emergency investment opportunity for Nolan. Then last month was Trent and Odessa's second mortgage. You're always so apathetic about these things. Bryn sighed dramatically. Numbers and books. Where is the human touch? Orin handed her the check. Human kindness doesn't pay the bills, Bryn. And family members usually don't come with itemized request forms. As she took the check, her fingers lingered on his hand, not in intimacy, but in assessment. You've changed. No. Orin turned back to his ledger. I just stopped pretending. After she left, Orin pulled a recorder out of a desk drawer and whispered, April 15th. An additional $2,000 for Isla's party was presented by Odessa through Bryn. In the past year alone, total funding for Harlow's family has exceeded $75,000. He paused, then added, Ellis asked me to teach him chess today. Bryn says that's boring and sends him to Odessa's for a decent playdate with Isla. Isla ended up playing with her friends for 3 hours, completely ignoring him, and he just sat there alone watching TV. A few months further on, one Sunday afternoon, Orin returned early from a business trip. He wanted to surprise Bryn and Ellis, but found the house empty. Bryn's car isn't in the garage. He tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. An uneasy feeling began to spread in his mind. It wasn't the first time, this unexplained absence, the vague, with friends answer. At first, he blamed it on her busy nonprofit career and devotion to her family. But the little things started to pile up. Cell phones with the screen facing down, phone calls where he would walk to another room, and credit card bills with unexplained hotel tea or boutique purchases that Bryn downplayed, as with my sisters, or for a charity event. That night, he sat in his study, looking at the family shared calendar open on his computer screen. Bryn marked the afternoon with tea with the sisters. But he'd called Odessa this morning to ask a Trent-related business question, and Odessa had casually mentioned that she'd been in a meeting with an interior design client all afternoon. A lie. A small lie, but now it seems like a crack in the darkness that sheds a disturbing light. Orin isn't an impulsive person. Anger burned slowly in him, but was kept in check by years of self-discipline. He didn't question Bryn right away. Instead, he began to pay more attention. He noticed the subtle change of expression that swept across her face as she answered the phone, noticed the way she averted her eyes, noticed an almost euphoric sense of secrecy that he had never seen in her before. He remembered a name she'd been mentioning a lot lately, Julian, a very charismatic consultant who advises her nonprofit organization. She has laughed about how he lights up the room. Orin didn't think much of it at the time, except that it was her usual enthusiasm for new acquaintances. But now the name echoed in his mind with ominous overtones. He didn't hire a private investigator. That's not his style. He prefers to gather his own information and arm himself with irrefutable facts. He used his tech savvy, which had been the cornerstone of his logistics empire, to start keeping an eye out for those digital trails. He hadn't cracked her code. He respected the boundaries of privacy, even when suspicions were rife. But when Bryn leaves the house in a hurry once and forgets her usual tablet, which stays logged in, he sees an opportunity. He hadn't meant to snoop and had initially just wanted to help her turn off the device. But the email preview header that popped up on the screen made him stall in his movements. Last night was incredible, Jay. Orin's heart sank. He hesitated for a moment, his inner moral code warring fiercely with the doubts that churned within him. Eventually, doubt prevailed. He clicked on the email. The content is explicit and passionate, and the detail is so rich as to be sickening. It's not just this one letter. There are also previous emails dating back months. The emails are filled with details of their secret dates, Bryn's complaints about Orin, calling him cold, boring, and like an emotional robot, and Julian's flattering and seductive responses. In one of the emails, dated 3 weeks ago, Bryn wrote, Orin is too focused on his numbers and his little project son to ever know. It's the time with you that makes me feel alive. The pain of betrayal injected itself instantly into Orin's veins like cold venom. It wasn't just physical infidelity, it was total emotional betrayal, a merciless mockery of their 15-year marriage. There was something even more disturbing in the email. An email from Odessa to Bryn, dated a month ago. If Orin ever gets really hardcore about divorce, we need to make sure Ellis is with you. Trent says the best strategy is to claim he's emotionally neglectful. Children at this age are easy to guide. We just need to plant the right stories. Orin felt a wave of vertigo. Not only had they betrayed him, they were scheming to use his son. At that moment, the remaining warmth in his heart was completely extinguished. Anger rolled inside him like a volcano, but he forced himself to calm down. He quickly and systematically forwarded the emails to one of his secure email addresses, then cleared the browsing traces from the tablet and put the device back as if it had never been moved. When Bryn came back that night, he was on his usual behavior. She complained about the day's labor and Odessa's demands, then kissed Ellis on the forehead and wished him a good night. Orin looked at her, and for the first time he really saw her for what she really was, hiding behind a facade of elegance. He didn't snap on the spot. He knew that the time had not yet come. His revenge will not be an emotional outburst, but a carefully planned, step-by-step operation. He went back to his study, pulled out the leather-bound journal, turned to a new page, and began to write. The tip of his pen pressed hard against the paper. This time, he documents not only the flow of money and the manipulation of his family, but also the evidence of his wife's betrayal and their plot to harm his son. He wrote, "It's time. Isla's 17th birthday party is underway by the country club pool." Ellis excitedly shouted, "Daddy, look at this." His tiny body wobbled as he stood on the diving board. Orin looked up from his conversation with Hex Monroe. Hex is a longtime friend, a mechanical expert who helped Orin build his logistics company from scratch. Strong as a bear, with a florid white beard and hands always covered in grease, Hex looked out of place in a crowd of well-dressed country club members. "I'm watching, man," Orin responded, smiling as he watched Ellis complete a perfect cannonball dive that splashed the side of the pool. "Your son has a streak." Hex's gruff voice held a rare gentleness. "That much like his mom," Orin replies, though the analogy is unconvincing. On the other side of the pool, Bryn was circling her sister and brother, occasionally glancing disapprovingly in Orin's direction. Isla sat at another table with her friends, making no effort to hide her disdain for her little cousin. Ellis climbs out of the pool and runs back to the diving board. Orin excuses himself to Hex and approaches the pool, wanting to be close to Ellis in case he needs help. Passing Isla's table, he overheard her telling her friends, "That's my weird uncle." She didn't even bother to lower her volume. "Mom says he's like emotionally stunted or something. It's basically Aunt Bryn running things because he's completely clueless about normal human affairs." Orin's steps faltered for a moment, but he continued on, no expression on his face. Those words, in the past, might have stung him, but now, after he knew the deeper betrayal, it was just noise. Later that night, as the guests began to disperse, Orin was blocked by Trent near the bar. "Great party, isn't it? Thanks for the check," Trent said, tapping Orin on the shoulder with a forced familiarity. "Listen, I've been meaning to talk to you about a business opportunity. My company is expanding its logistics consulting business, and with your experience, you want me to invest," Orin said bluntly. Trent's smile flickered. "I want to give you a chance. The bottom line is in, and it pays off handsomely. Like last year's real estate investment, that program that needs an emergency capital injection in 6 months. Market fluctuations," Trent waved his hand dismissively, "are different this time." "It's different every time." Orin took a sip of his whiskey. "Send me the business plan. I'll watch." "Great." Trent is as good as relieved. "I knew you'd see the potential. Hey, family should take care of each other, right?" As Trent walks away, Orin notices Odessa walking towards Bryn, and the two women glance in his direction before coming closer together to talk in low voices. The expressions on their faces, that calculating and conspiring demeanor, could not have been clearer to him now. On the way home, Ellis fell asleep in the back seat. Bryn broke the silence. "You embarrassed me tonight." Orin has his eyes on the road. "What exactly?" "Bring Hex to a country club event." Standing there with a stern face the whole time. "Also, while Odessa was trying to introduce me to the chair of the Willamette Valley Arts Council, you made a big deal about Ellis being on the diving board. Ellis could be hurt. He's fine. You're literally killing him with this excessive attention. He needs to learn to be independent. He's 9. Another thing," Bryn continued as if she hadn't heard him, "is that you never talk out loud, even when you're angry. This is so unnatural. It makes everyone uncomfortable. I apologize for inconveniencing you with my emotional regulation skills." Orin replied flatly. "Watch. This is it." "This." Bryn's voice raised. "Who talks like that?" Emotional regulation? You're like a robot pretending to be an adult. Ellis stirred in the back seat, and Orin lowered his voice further. We'll talk about it at home. Once Ellis was in bed, Bryn renewed her attack in the kitchen, her voice rising with each accusation. You don't care about my family. You don't care about my career. All you care about is those precious systems of yours and that little pet son of yours. Leave Ellis out of this. Orin warned, a rare edge to his voice. This time, he knows there's a deeper malice behind her pet son, a plan to turn Ellis into a tool against him. Why not? You've turned him into a miniature version of you. Quiet, judgmental, and… Enough. Orin's voice didn't rise, but something in his tone made Bryn stop in the middle of a sentence. He took a step forward, his gaze sharp as a knife. I've been feeding your family for 15 years. I never questioned your career choice. I attended every event, made every donation, and signed every check. But Ellis is the bottom line. He's not a project. He's my son. Our son. Bryn subconsciously corrected. Yes. Orin asked softly, this time with a double meaning, pointing both to her mother's office and alluding to the conspiracy behind her. When was the last time you helped him with his homework? Attend his science club meetings? Ask him how the book he's reading is going. I'm busy. I'm responsible. I have to. And right now, it's my responsibility to protect my son from becoming collateral damage in the game you and your family are playing. Bryn's eyes narrowed. What do you mean by that? Orin didn't answer. He went straight to his study and closed the door, leaving Bryn standing alone in the kitchen. He knew she had no idea how much he already knew. He wouldn't tell her either. His plan requires patience and precision. He went into the study and locked the door. He sat down at his desk and turned on the ledger that recorded everything and the recording device next to it. Then he opened the secure email address that had forwarded the email and reconfirmed the sickening evidence. He pulls out his leather-bound journal and begins to detail everything that happened tonight, including Trent's investment offer, Isla's mean comments, and Bryn's accusations in the car. Finally, he wrote down Julian's name and every detail he had about their relationship. His handwriting was calm and steady, but inside he was a cold sheet of anger and determination. The blueprint for revenge was being clearly outlined in his mind, stroke by stroke. The community center is bustling with activity as Ellis Science Club prepares for the regional competition. Orin shuttles from table to table, helping students work out the kinks in their projects while keeping an eye out for Ellis, who is working with a girl named Penny on a model wind turbine. Mr. Mallerie, came a voice from behind her. Orin turns to see Delaney Ross, Ellis's former kindergarten teacher, now in charge of Science Club. Her warm brown eyes crinkle at the corners when she smiles, and her naturally curly hair is tied back in a practical ponytail. Ms. Ross. Orin nodded. The kids look ready to go, thanks to you. She replied. Not a lot of parents come to volunteer every week. She hesitated, then added. Ellis mentioned Mrs. Mallerie couldn't make it to the game this weekend either. Orin's expression stays neutral. She has a fundraiser. Delaney nodded, a look of understanding that needed no words in her eyes. Well, Ellis is lucky to have you on his side. Some kids don't have people who can stick around to show up. Before Orin could answer, his cell phone rang. It was a text from Bryn. Urgently need you to wire Nolan $5,000. His startup had an emergency. Back to explaining. He put away his cell phone and didn't reply. Is everything okay? Delaney asked. Family matters. Orin replied vaguely. About the game. I'd like to drive Ellis there myself instead of putting him on a group bus. Is that okay? Sure. In fact, I need just the extra space for the equipment. She smiled, then lowered her voice. We say privately that Ellis and Penny's program is the most powerful. I wouldn't be surprised if they win. Orin allowed himself a small smile. He's been working hard. Later that night, Orin sat at his desk talking on the phone while Ellis did his homework in the corner of the den built especially for him next to him. Parker, I need to amend the trust document as we discussed. Orin whispered into the phone. Yes, including the clause about custody. No, I don't think they will need to be used, but I want them ready to go. Yes, by next week preferably. Hanging up, he dialed another number. Hex, it's me, Orin. Remember that warehouse space we looked at in Bellevue? I'd like to start renting it. Yes, I know the upstairs is residential. That's exactly what I want. As he ended the call, he noticed Ellis looking at him. Everything all right, buddy? Orin asked. Ellis put down his pencil. Are you and Mom getting a divorce? The directness of the question caught Orin a little off guard, but he'd never lied to his son, and he wouldn't start now. He walked over to Ellis and sat down. Why do you ask? Aunt Odessa told Mom she should talk to her lawyer friend. I went to get the water yesterday when they were having lunch and heard it. Orin weighs his words. Your mom and I had some disagreements. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I want you to know that no matter what, you will always be the most important person in my life. Ellis nodded slowly. Can I still live with you if you and Mom aren't together anymore? If you want. Orin's voice softened. Do you want to? Ellis lowered her head and looked at her homework. Mom's always away anyway. When I'm at home, I'm always on the phone or mad at someone, too. He looked up at his father. You make stuff with me. You listen to me. Orin put his arm around his son's shoulders. Then we'll try to make it happen. His inner resolve was even stronger. Protecting Ellis from that environment of calculation and betrayal is his top priority. After Ellis falls asleep, Orin receives a text message from an unfamiliar number. Operation Good Day has been launched. Orin immediately deleted the message and turned to his journal. Tonight's transcript will be particularly detailed, not only about the greed of Bryn's family, but also about his preparations for the coming storm and, as he's just found out, their diabolical plan to exploit even the emotions of their children. Every word he wrote carried an icy determination. Sunday dinner at Mallerie's has become a tradition that Orin quietly endures. This particular evening, Odessa dominated the conversation, recounting a recent case study her interior design firm received from a high-profile client. Of course, I told her that the eggshell color didn't suit her skin tone at all. The house needs to set her off, not make her look pale. She didn't get it at first, but by the time I showed her a sample of seafoam green, she was practically begging me to take on the project. Odessa explained as she gestured with her fork. Trent nodded knowingly. The Hendersons did the same thing when they hired my firm to reorganize their portfolio. Sometimes clients don't know what they need until they see it. Speaking of clients, Nolan interjected, attention turning to Orin. Any news on that investment we discussed? The Series B closes this Friday. Before Orin could answer, Bryn snaps. Of course he'll help. Right, honey? Family is all about supporting each other. The matter-of-factness in that tone sent a wave of nausea through Orin. The doorbell rang, interrupting the conversation. I'll get it, Orin said, standing up. He returned quickly, followed by a courier in a smart uniform. There are documents that need to be signed by all of you on the spot, the courier announced. What about dinner time? Bryn frowned. Can't this wait? I'm afraid not, ma'am. The courier replied, placing 6 identical envelopes on the table. I need to witness each recipient open the envelope and acknowledge receipt of the contents. Odessa picked up the envelope with her name on it. What is it, Orin? I don't know, he replied, resuming his seat. One by one, they opened the envelopes. Inside each envelope was a letter on the letterhead of Whitman Frost & Associates, one of Portland's most prestigious law firms. The room was silent, the only sound being the turning of paper. This is ridiculous. Trent was the first to speak up, cracks appearing in his confident facade. Slander? Emotional manipulation? What kind of joke is this? It's not a joke, Orin replied calmly. It's documentation. Bryn stared at him, his face pale. You've been recording? Our private conversation. Oregon is a one-party consent recording state, Orin states, and everything on the record is legal and admissible into evidence. He specifically emphasized consent of a party, implying that he had every right to record the conversations in which he participated. Nolan slammed the letter down on the table. You can't prove anything. Page 3, Orin instructed, is a complete transcript of your explanation last March as to why you needed $80,000. Compare that to the business plan you show investors. Nolan's face instantly lost its blood color. Odessa turned to Bryn. You knew about this? That's what you've been urging us to. Don't finish that sentence, Odessa. Orin interrupted. You'll only make it worse. The courier cleared his throat. If you all acknowledge receipt, I need to sign this form. After the courier left, the restaurant erupted. You manipulative maniac. Trent began. Be careful, Orin warned. Remember that letter. Every word spoken in this house could be being recorded. His gaze swept over everyone in the room, including Bryn, and he wanted them to understand that the rules of the game had changed. Ellis looked back and forth between the adults, confusion and fear written all over her face. Orin turned to him gently. Ellis, why don't you go upstairs and play with your model first? I'll be up there in a minute to help you. After Ellis left, Bryn turned to Orin. How dare you do this in front of our son? Our son? Orin raised an eyebrow. The son you offered to send to camp so he wouldn't get in the way of your sister's pool remodeling plans? The son whose science competition you missed to hang out with Isla? He paused, his voice colder. Or was that the one where you and Odessa planned to steer him toward accusing my emotionally neglectful son if I filed for divorce? These last words were like a bomb thrown into stagnant water, and Bryn and Odessa's faces instantly turned pale. That's not fair, Bryn screamed. Indeed, it is not fair, Orin agreed. What you have done to him, to me, including you. He looked straight at Bryn. And those tea times spent with Julian were extremely unfair. At the mention of Julian's name, Bryn shuddered, a flash of panic in his eyes. She didn't think he even knew about it. Orin stood up. I think dinner's over. You all have copies of the documents. The choice is yours as to what happens next. He looked at their stunned and fearful expressions, and there was not a trace of pity in his heart, only icy pleasure. 15 years of endurance and record-keeping had finally come to a time of reckoning. As the others dazedly gathered their things, Isla approached Orin. My mother said you'd come this way. She tried to act provocative, though her voice was shaking. She said you were calculating and cold. Orin looked straight at her. Your mom also said that the money she borrowed from me last year was for your college fund. You want to know where that money actually goes? Isla hesitates, then turns and walks away. After everyone left, Bryn confronted Orin in the kitchen. What do you want? Money? The house? Is this some kind of sick negotiating tactic? What I want has never changed, Orin replied. A family that respects each other and is honest with each other. Since that's obviously not possible, I'll settle for the next best thing, protecting Ellis and I from further exploitation and harm. You can't take my son from me. I don't want to, Orin said truthfully, but I will if I have to. Especially after I learned about your and Odessa's plans on how to channel him. Bryn's expression turned somber. You just declared war on the wrong family, Orin. You may have your little files and recordings, but we have contacts, people of influence in this city. I know. Orin nodded. That's why over the past year, I've been building my own network as well. His gaze was firm and unflinching. It was a battle for which he had long been well prepared. Bryn sat in her attorney Vance Caldwell's office in downtown Portland, the rain pounding on the glass outside the window, reflecting her somber expression. There's no way he could have had documentation for all of this, Bryn insisted, pushing the letter from attorney Orin across the desk. Vance, a thin man with the tired look always in his eyes, scanned the file again. Mrs. Mallerie, I must ask, are these allegations true? That's not the point, Bryn snapped. The point is he threatened my family. He tried to take my son. The point, Vance countered carefully, is whether he can prove what he claims. Because if he can, he paused and adjusted his glasses. What if he can? Bryn pursued. If he can, you're in big trouble. Vance pulled out a folder. I accessed your prenuptial agreement. That old stuff? Signed 15 years ago when we had nothing. You signed it, Vance emphasized, and it's exceptionally well thought out. There was a special clause dealing with emotional sabotage and family interference, which gave Mr. Mallerie grounds for invalidating the community property clause. Bryn's confidence was shaken. What does it mean in the big white language? Meaning he retains all property in his name. And according to the financial records you provided, Vance flipped through some papers. The house is in his name. The vehicle was leased through his company. Your joint account is actually an escrow account, and he is the primary holder. It's not possible. I sign checks from our joint account all the time. You have signature authority, but not ownership. Vance took off his glasses. Mrs. Mallerie, have you read any of the financial documents you've signed in the last 15 years? Bryn's silence is the answer. And, Vance continued reluctantly, the trust set up for Ellis named him as sole trustee. Your visitation rights are contingent on cohabitation with the child, which will end after the divorce. So I get nothing? Bryn's voice rose incredulously. After 15 years of marriage, you get what the prenuptial agreement stipulates, a lump sum of $100,000, adjusted for inflation. Unless what? Unless you can prove he violated the terms in the first place. Vance leaned forward. Did he ever abuse you or Ellis? Ever abdicated his financial responsibility? Ever had an affair? Bryn struggled to recall, then crumpled into a chair. No, he's been frustratingly perfect on paper. She suddenly realized what Orin's mention of Julian's name meant. If Orin has proof. She didn't dare think about it. Then we need to consider a settlement, Vance suggested, before things escalate further. On the other side of town, Orin is meeting with Paris Whitman, the steel-tough founding partner of Whitman Frost & Associates. Her office overlooked a panoramic view of Mount Hood, though neither had the heart to appreciate it. Your paper trail is impeccable, Paris said as she reviewed the files on her tablet, recordings, financial records, witness statements. Most clients bring emotions, you bring evidence. And this, she pulled up a separate file. Evidence of your wife's extramarital affairs, emails, credit card records, and even a couple of not-so-clear but recognizable photos. It changes the nature of the game. I took the time to prepare. Orin replied. I can see that. Paris put down the tablet. The letter has been served. What is your desired outcome, Mr. Mallerie? Full custody of my son, and my wife's visitation needs to be supervised until she proves she is stable and no longer negatively affected by her family. Terminate all my financial obligations to her family without legal recourse. As well, complete closure, no protracted court battles, no media attention. Paris nodded. A tall order, but not impossible given the evidence you've provided. Evidence of an extramarital affair, in particular, is a powerful bargaining chip in the fight for custody and a quick financial settlement. She studied him. With all due respect, why did you wait so long to act? Some of the records go back almost a decade. Orin's expression remained motionless, but something flickered in his eyes. I had thought things would change. They may see Ellis as more of a presence than a pawn or a burden. Bryn might remember why we got married in the first place. And when did you realize that wasn't going to happen? When they voted to evict me from my own family in front of my son. Orin replied emotionlessly. Also, when he finds out that not only did she betray him, but she's laughing at him with others and planning to take advantage of their son. Paris made a note. You understand it won't be easy. Your wife's family has extensive social connections in Portland. Odessa Harlow chairs 2 prominent philanthropic committees. Trent Harlow plays golf with Judge Werner, and your brother-in-law's tech company sponsors half the cultural events in town. I'm counting on those relationships, Orin said. People with influence have more to lose when their reputations are at stake. Are you ready to pay a personal price? These types of cases can get ugly. Orin nodded. I've paid the personal price for 15 years, Ms. Whitman. For now, at least, it's for something worthwhile. The Bell Tower Cafe sits on the edge of downtown, far enough away from the legal district to avoid running into anyone in Bryn's social circle. Orin arrives early and takes a corner table overlooking the entrance. He ordered a black coffee and waited. Delaney Ross arrived on time. She sees Orin and walks over to the table. Thank you for being willing to see me. Orin stood briefly as she sat down. Your message sounds important, Delaney replied. Is Ellis okay? It's okay for now, Orin said. But that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you. For the next hour, Orin outlined the situation with Bryn and her family, careful to state only verifiable facts, not emotional interpretations. He left out the part about the affair, focusing only on the manipulation of the family and the potential impact on Ellis. Delaney listened intently. That's a lot of information to digest. She finally spoke after he finished. I've been feeling a little nervous, but I didn't think it would come to this. Very few people know, Orin admits. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm in the process of filing for divorce and custody, Orin says bluntly. I need character certificates, people who can attest to my relationship with Ellis, to his well-being, and to the bond between us. You think I'm a good witness? You're his teacher, and you've seen us together every week for 2 years at the science club. You've also met Bryn on her occasional school functions. Delaney's expression got serious. What you're asking for is no small thing, Orin. Taking sides in a custody battle could affect my professional reputation. I know, Orin admitted. So I'm not asking you to lie or exaggerate, just to state the facts as you observe them. That's all. She watched him for a long time. Can I ask you a question first? I need to be completely honest. Orin nodded. Are you doing this for Ellis or to punish Bryn? Both. Orin doesn't hesitate to admit it. I want to protect Ellis. Yes, I too hope that Bryn and her family suffer the consequences for their actions. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't what I consider to be justice in this. Delaney seemed surprised by his candor. Most would claim pure motives. I'm not most people, Orin replied, and you wouldn't believe it. A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. Yes, I won't. She took a deep breath. For Ella's sake, I'll testify about what I observed. That boy deserves stability and support. Thank you. Orin puts it simply. But Delaney added firmly, I need your assurance that you will not use me or my testimony out of vindictiveness. I'm doing this for Ellis, not to help you destroy your wife. I assure you. Orin agreed. Destruction is not my goal. Protection is what it is. Later that day, Orin drove his pickup truck into Hex's auto repair shop in an industrial neighborhood on the east side. He found Hex underneath an old Mustang. The package has arrived, Orin announced. Hex slid out from under the car and wiped his hands on a rag. Warehouse key. Orin handed him a small envelope. There are also mixed-use zoning approvals. You can start decorating anytime you want. Hex put the envelope in his pocket and didn't open it. Are you sure about this schedule? Even for you. That's too soon. I'm sure, Orin confirmed. Things are picking up speed at home. Hex nodded, his expression serious under his rough beard. Any news since you got the letter from Bryn? There is no direct connection. Her lawyer called my lawyer. They're evaluating options. Hex lets out a chuckle that isn't a chuckle. Rich people talk. Meaning, how do we make this go away? True, Orin agreed. But it won't go away this time. Very good. Hex throws away the rag and crosses his enormous arms. Never liked it when they treated you like an ATM with legs. He hesitated, then added, What about the baby? Ellis is my first priority, Orin said firmly. Everything else is negotiable. You know, Hex gazed at his friend, most men broke down years ago. Drinking, being violent, or doing stupid things. You've just gotten more strategic. Orin shrugged slightly. Learned early on that emotions are bad counselors. Your foster family? Hex asked, referring to Orin's occasional references to his childhood. 7 home changes in 12 years. Teach you to look ahead, Orin confirms, and plan an exit strategy. Well, I'm in, Hex announced, holding out his hand. Whatever you need. Orin shook his hand. I appreciate it. And, Orin, Hex added as his friend turned to leave, remember what we talked about. The strategy is good, but that boy needs his father's heart, not just his brain. Orin paused for a moment, then nodded and stepped into the fading daylight. Meanwhile, Bryn sits in Odessa's elaborately decorated living room, surrounded by her family. The atmosphere was tense, and everyone was still reeling from the shock of receiving the letter. He's bluffing, Nolan insisted, pacing the Italian marble floor. He can't really have a recording. It's a scare tactic. Then why did you look like you were going to faint when he mentioned your investor pitch? Isla asked, looking up from her phone in a rare moment this time, clearly also distracted by the family crisis. Stay out of this, Odessa snapped at her daughter. This is adult business. It's about how you guys got caught using Uncle Orin as a personal bank, isn't it? Isla retorted. Yeah, Super Lord. Isla, Trent warned, but there was more fear than authority in his voice. Bryn massaged his temples. My lawyer said that Orin had been planning this for years. Prenuptial agreements, property ownership, account. Everything is in his name. And her voice trailed off with a hint of panic. Vance said that if Orin had other aspects of evidence, such as infidelity, it gets worse. How could you let this happen? Odessa questioned. You were supposed to be the smart one. Me? Bryn's voice raised. It started because you guys kept borrowing money from him. Just ask Orin. Orin won't mind. That's what family does. Every time you guys need something. Oh, don't play innocent, Odessa hissed. You'd be happy to live in that house, drive that car, and take all those vacations, too, all on his dime, while you play the philanthropist with other people's money. Enough. Shut up, all of you, Trent interrupted. Fighting each other is exactly what he wants. We need to stick together. Unite against what? Nolan asked. Have you seen the documents he has? He had us discussing how to manipulate his mail. And Bryn, he turned to his sister, What did you mean earlier about other evidence? Those were private conversations. Odessa insisted. It was done on an account he apparently paid for. Nolan retorted. Do you know what would happen to my company if these recordings were made public? I'll lose all my investors overnight. He doesn't realize yet that Orin could have something worse on his hands. Bryn stood up abruptly. I need to talk to Ellis. Is that wise? Trent asked carefully. Considering the custody situation, he's my son, Bryn snapped. And he's my best chance to impress Orin. Using a child as leverage? Nolan raised an eyebrow. That's pretty much what got us to this point. Bryn grabbed her purse. I'm not using him. I was fighting for him. There's a difference. As she walked toward the door, Odessa called after her. Bryn, be careful. If Orin really did record everything. Bryn stopped and put his hand on the doorknob. Then I'd better make sure what I say next is worth hearing, hadn't I? But for the first time, deep down she felt real fear. If Orin knew everything, including Julian, she'd really have no way back. Isla Harlow grew up among adults who maintained a carefully curated public image. She watched her mother, tired and irritable at home, become charming and elegant in social situations. She'd seen her father switch from dismissive to caring based on his client's net worth. She'd observed her Aunt Bryn practicing what to say to donors in front of the mirror. So when the letter detailing her family's manipulative behavior arrives, Isla feels an unexpected emotion, a sense of validation. Finally, someone saw what she had been seeing for years. In her bedroom, Isla reread the portion of the letter that specifically referred to her. The audio files document discussions between Odessa Harlow and Bryn Mallerie regarding the use of Isla Harlow to facilitate financial requests including, but not limited to, donations to the university fund, $45,000, expenses for a study trip to Europe, $22,000, and payments for the purchase of a car, $35,000, none of which were utilized for the stated purpose. With a shaking hand, Isla opened TikTok and started recording. So my uncle just sent these insanely detailed letters to everyone in my family revealing how we've been ripping him off all these years. She began, holding up the first page of the letter bearing the law firm's letterhead. And this, my parents said they gave me money for college and they took it to renovate the bathroom. I literally have the receipt right here. The video automatically cuts off at the 3-minute mark, but by then, Isla has shown enough of the letter's contents, including names, amounts, and allegations, to ensure that the matter won't remain a secret. She clicked publish without hesitation. 24 hours later, the video had been viewed over 500,000 times and was shared across multiple platforms. Local news outlets picked up on the story, with a special focus on Trent Harlow, whose financial consulting firm serves Portland's elite, and Odessa, who serves as a trustee for several prominent charities. Orin learned of the viral video, not through social media, but from Paris Whitman, who called him directly. Your niece is complicating things. Paris opened the door and informed him. Orin is helping Ellis with her homework at the kitchen table when he walks into the den to answer the phone. What happened? Paris explained the situation. This changes our schedule. The Harlow family's attorney has contacted us to seek an injunction against Isla, but the damage has already been done. The court of public opinion is now in session. I didn't plan this, Orin declared. I believe you, Paris replied, but it affects our strategy. Judge Werner has recused himself from the possibility of possibly hearing your case. Apparently, he's clearing the air with Trent Harlow as quickly as possible. It's in our favor. However, Bryn's attorney will likely claim that this public exposure is part of your campaign against her, which may elicit sympathy. Understood, Orin said. What do we do next? Remain completely silent, Paris advises. No comments to the media, no social media posts, nothing. Let the Harlows have their hands full in public while you maintain your dignity. Focus on Ellis and make sure he's affected by these things as little as possible. After ending the call, Orin returns to the kitchen, where Ellis is still working on math problems. Is everything okay, Dad? Ellis asked, looking up. Orin is sitting next to him. Things might get a little complicated over the next few days. People might say things about our family. Ellis nodded gravely. Like when Aunt Odessa tells everyone at school that Mommy is having a hard time because you're hard to live with. Orin kept his face neutral despite his inner surprise. When did that happen? At the school auction last month, Ellis said matter-of-factly. She told Mrs. Brennan that Mom deserved a medal for putting up with you. I see, Orin said carefully. How does that make you feel? Ellis pondered the question with the seriousness that only a 9-year-old can muster. Anger. Because you're not hard to get along with. You're just quiet. He looked up at his father. Mom's the one who yells, slams doors, and talks bad about everyone when no one else can hear. Orin put his hand on his son's shoulder. Ellis, I want you to know that whatever happened between your mom and me, it wasn't because of anything you did. I know, Ellis replied with surprising certainty. Ms. Ross said that adults make their own choices, and it's not the child's responsibility to fix them. Mr. Ross is very wise, Orin said, making a mental note to thank Delaney for her insight. That night, after Ellis fell asleep, the doorbell rang at Orin's house. He opened the door to find Bryn standing on the porch, his eyes red and swollen, his normally flawless appearance looking disheveled. Did you watch the news? She demanded as she pushed past him into the foyer. I don't watch the news, Orin replied calmly, closing the door. You should watch. Those precious paper records of yours are all over the net now. Trent's biggest customers are pulling out. Odessa was asked to resign from the Children's Hospital Board of Directors. Nolan's company shares are down 30%. Her voice rose with each word. Keep it down, Orin warned softly. Ellis is asleep. Our son is now the least of your concerns. Bryn hissed. My sister's reputation is ruined. My brother's company is collapsing. All because you can't stand a little family criticism. A House vote designed to evict me from my home is not criticism, Bryn, it's cruelty. Orin's voice stays steady. And I didn't post anything online. That's Isla's choice. After you mailed those letters that contain only the truth. Orin countered. If the truth damages your family, maybe the problem isn't the person delivering the message. Bryn's expression shifted from anger to calculation. What do you want, Orin? Money? The house? Name a price and make this go away. I've told you what I want. Divorce and custody of Ellis. You can't take my son from me. Bryn insisted, but his tone was not as firm as before. I don't want to, Orin said truthfully, but I'll do whatever is necessary to protect him. Even if it was, his gaze sharpened, to protect him from the mothers and aunts who planned to guide him. And he paused to let the weight of his words sink in. To protect him from a mother who cheated on his father and mocked him with another man. Bryn's face went completely white. You know, I know everything, Bryn. Julian, the mail, your plans. Orin walks over to his desk and retrieves a printout, not of Odessa's email about guiding Ellis, but of Bryn's email to Julian, which is full of disparaging remarks about Orin and descriptions of their exciting relationship. That's just a small part of it. Bryn looked at the paper as if it would burn her hands. It finally dawned on her that she didn't have any leverage left. So, what now? Her voice was almost a whisper. Now you leave, Orin said. And tomorrow, my attorney will contact your attorney and offer settlement terms. I suggest you accept. Or what? Bryn challenged, but his voice was bottomless. Otherwise, we go to court. Everything. Every email, every recording, every financial transaction, and every detail of your relationship with Julian will be a matter of public record. Orin opened the front door. Your choice. After Bryn left, Orin checked on Ellis. He slept peacefully. Orin gently adjusted the blanket over his son's shoulders before returning to the den. He sat at his desk for a long time, staring at the picture of the three of them taken on Ellis' 5th birthday. They seemed like the perfect family at the time. Maybe they never were. He opened his journal and began to write. He knew that the toughest part, the public confrontation, might still be ahead, but he was ready for it. For Ellis, for himself, for this liquidation that was 15 years late. The Multnomah County Courthouse stands in front of Orin as he walks up the steps side by side with Paris Whitman. Despite the early hour, a small group of reporters had gathered there, apparently drawn by the high-profile divorce involving the sister of notorious financial advisor Trent Harlow. Remember, no comments. Paris cautioned, though it wasn't necessary. Judge Martinez has a very disciplined courtroom. Stick to the facts and stay calm, no matter how provocative the other side is. Orin nodded and adjusted his tie. The charcoal gray suit he was wearing was one of the few concessions he made to his appearance. It was Ellis who helped him pick it out last weekend, insisting that his dad needed to look like a superhero in court. The courtroom was already filled with legal teams from both sides. Sitting next to her attorney, Vance Caldwell, Bryn looked subdued in a conservative navy blue dress which Orin recognized as her attire for important donor meetings. Behind her sit Odessa and Nolan, but Trent is conspicuously absent, presumably dealing with a career crisis brought on by the viral Isla video. As Orin sits down, he notices Delaney Ross quietly walk in and take a seat in the back row. Their eyes met briefly, and she gave a small, encouraging nod. All rise. The bailiff announced that Judge Elena Martinez had walked in. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked black hair and sharp eyes, and was known for her efficiency and intolerance of dramatic scenes. Mallerie versus Mallerie, she stated, reviewing the documents in front of her, marriage dissolution and custody determination. I have reviewed the documents submitted by the parties, including the fairly detailed documentation provided by petitioner. She looked up sharply. I'm going to make it clear from the start that I have no patience for public stunt in my courtroom. These programs will focus solely on the legal matter at hand, not social media drama or family feuds. Got it. Both teams of lawyers nodded. For the next 3 hours, the program went on in an orderly fashion. Financial records were submitted, timelines were established, and preliminary witness statements were entered into the record. Orin testified briefly about his relationship with Ellis, outlining his consistent involvement in his son's life, educational development, and emotional well-being. Paris team subtly hinted that Orin had more damaging evidence, but didn't immediately throw it all out, reserving room for pressure. When it was Bryn's turn to testify, her attorney, Vance, apparently tried to portray her as a dutiful but emotionally neglected wife of a cold husband. Mrs. Mallerie, Vance began the question, can you describe your husband's parenting style? Bryn looked at Orin for a moment, then replied, Orin is very organized. He believes in routine, consequences, and educational enrichment. He doesn't. She seemed to be weighing her words. He's not so passionate. In your own parenting style? I'm more flexible, Bryn replied. I believe children should experience different environments, different perspectives. My work in the philanthropic field has exposed Ellis to important social issues. Vance continues to lead. Have you ever been concerned about the emotional connection between your husband and your son? Bryn hesitated. Orin could feel the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on her. This is her chance to fight back, a moment when she can try to paint Orin as an unfit father. Vance clearly expects her to jump at the chance. However, Bryn took a deep breath and looked to the judge, his voice clear but with a hint of trembling. No. Whatever our differences, Orin loves Ellis. That was never in doubt. Vance appeared surprised that his client strayed from prepared testimony, but quickly recovered. He tried another route. Mrs. Mallerie, given the current situation, what custody arrangement do you think would be best for Ellis? Bryn hesitates again. For the first time, she looked directly at Orin. Her gaze was a mixture of despair, remorse, and perhaps a hint of exhaustion. Then she turned to the judge. I'm sure. I believe Ellis should live primarily with his father. A murmur rang through the courtroom. Judge Martinez banged the gavel. Mrs. Mallerie, the judge addressed her directly. Are you stating on the record that you support the petitioner's request for primary physical custody? Yes, Your Honor. Bryn confirmed, her voice steady despite the tears starting to well up in her eyes. Of course, I'd like to have lax visitation rights. But Orin can provide the stability Ellis needs right now. During the ensuing recess, Paris pulled Orin aside in the hallway. Did you know she'd give up custody? She asked incredulously. No, Orin admitted, genuinely surprised. I expected a hard fight. He suspected that part of Bryn's sudden concession might be because she did recognize her mistake. But to a greater extent, it might be that Vance had explained to her that if Orin went public with all the evidence, especially the evidence of the affair, she would face total destruction. Giving up custody is a stop-loss. It changes things dramatically, Paris noted. Custody is basically uncontested, and we can. At that point, Delaney hesitantly approached them. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say that Ellis asked me to give this to you. She handed Orin a folded piece of paper. He did it yesterday at the science club. Orin unfolded the paper to see a crayon drawing of him and Ellis standing in front of what looked like a new house with the words, My Adventure with Daddy. written in childish handwriting. He's been talking about your plans to move, Delaney explains with a hint of a smile, and he calls it your shared adventure. I thought you might need this today. Thank you, Orin said simply, carefully refolding the painting and placing it in the inside pocket of his suit, near his heart. When the hearing resumed, Judge Martinez went straight to the ruling, noting the special circumstances under which the custody claim was uncontested. Based on the evidence presented and the agreement of the parties, I award primary physical custody of Ellis Mallerie to her father, Orin Mallerie, with standard visitation rights for Bryn Mallerie. She gave Bryn a stern look. Mrs. Mallerie, while I appreciate that you have clearly prioritized your son's well-being in this matter, I must point out that the information presented to this court about your past behavior towards Mr. The documentation of Mallory's behavior is disturbing. Your visitation rights will be reviewed in 6 months to ensure compliance with the court order. As for the financial division, the court strictly enforced the terms of the prenuptial agreement. Considering the documentation provided by Orin regarding the long history of financial exploitation by Bryn and his family and Bryn's marital squandering of part of the evidence impliedly related to the affair, the judge rejected any claim for additional damages filed by Bryn's attorneys. Ultimately, Bryn received only the lump sum of approximately $150,000, adjusted for inflation, that the prenuptial agreement provided for. Compared to the lifestyle she was used to and Orin's vast assets, it amounted to almost nothing. The house, the shares of the company, and most of the liquid assets were left in Orin's name in accordance with the prenuptial agreement and Orin's role as principal holder. By late afternoon, the program was all but over. The divorce decree is in force. As they walked out of the court building, Orin was surprised to find Bryn waiting near the bottom of the steps, away from the remaining reporters. Can we talk? She asked softly as he approached. Paris gave him a warning look, but Orin nodded. You go first, I'll catch up later. When it was just the two of them left, Bryn spoke first. I know you're surprised I didn't fight for custody. Yes, Orin admits. I read all your documents, she explained. Not just the letters you sent, but the entire file your attorney submitted to the court. She looked him straight in the eye. Blanket STH. The ones about Julian. I didn't realize. I let my family's influence run so deep that I began to see Ellis as an obligation, not as my son. Her voice was slightly choked. When I read the entry where he tells you that he feels like the invisible man when I'm around, something broke inside me, Orin. Orin stays silent and lets her continue. I'm not going to pretend that this makes everything okay between us, Bryn continued. You systematically destroyed my life, the safety and security of my family. Part of me hates you for that. I understand. Orin puts it simply. But you're right about one thing, she admitted. Ellis deserves better than I've been giving him. So I'll try. I will win back his place in my life the right way. Orin watched her for a moment. I won't stop you from seeing him. No matter what happens between us, he loves you. I know. Bryn nodded. I'll make sure he knows I love him too. Not as an extension of myself or my family, but as himself. She took a deep breath. I also want you to know that I cut ties with Odessa and Trent. What they want to do to Ellis. I can't forgive. That's your decision. Orin replied, neither encouraging nor discouraging. Well, Bryn exhaled heavily. I guess that's it. As she turned to leave, Orin spoke. Bryn. She stopped and looked back at him. For old time's sake, I'm sorry it's come to this. There was a time when I believed in us. A sad smile swept across her lips. I believed it too. Take care of our son, Orin. Always will. He promised. Watching Bryn's forlorn back disappear into the crowd, there was no joy of victory in Orin's heart, only a long, exhausting relief. He knows that Bryn has lost not just money and custody, but everything she once had: social status, a family support network, and her smug sense of superiority. It was the inevitable result of the path she had chosen for herself. And he can finally take his son and start their real adventure. 2 weeks after the divorce was finalized, Orin stood in the empty living room of their former home, overseeing the movers as they moved the last of the labeled boxes. The house that held 15 years of memories, good and bad, is now nothing but an empty echo. Ellis ran from room to room, her footsteps making a hollow sound on the bare floor. Dad, I found this behind the bookshelf. He held up a small, dusty toy car. Can I take it to its new home? Of course, Orin replied, kneeling down to examine the treasure. That was your first windjammer when you were 3. Ellis grinned and pocketed the car. Will Hex be waiting for us over there? He's already there, setting up your bedroom furniture. Orin looked at his watch. Mr. Ross will bring pizza for dinner around 6. Fantastic. Ellis cheered, then paused for a moment, her expression turning serious. Is Mom coming to see the new house too? Orin weighs his words. Not today, but she's coming next weekend, just like we agreed. Ellis nodded, digesting the information. She called me yesterday. She said she was taking a class on how to be a better listener. That's good, Orin said neutrally, though he was privately surprised and cautiously hopeful about Bryn's obvious efforts, not for their sake, but for Ellis. After the movers left, Orin and Ellis stood in the empty foyer, ready to begin our adventure. Orin held out his hand. Ellis doesn't hesitate to hold it. Get ready. The new home is not really new at all. It is a renovated warehouse in Bellevue, a small neighborhood 20 minutes from Portland. The ground floor houses the logistics school that Orin began preparing months ago, and the top floor has been transformed into a spacious apartment with large windows overlooking the Willamette River. When they arrived, Hex was directing his 2 nephews in assembling Ellis' bed frame. The place is taking shape. The burly mechanic waved in greeting. Kitchens all hooked up, living rooms set up, working on the bedrooms. Ellis immediately ran off to explore his new space, raving about the built-in bookshelves and the desk that captures the afternoon sun. You did all this while you were planning your divorce? Hex asked in a low voice as he stood in the doorway, side by side with Orin. There has to be something to look forward to, Orin replied. A place where we can start over. Hex nodded approvingly. Smart as always. School starts next month. In 3 weeks, Orin confirms. The first session is full. Practical logistics training that doesn't require a 4-year degree has proven to be in high demand. You always see opportunities that others miss, Hex noted. Speaking of which, Orin pulled a set of keys from his pocket and handed them to Hex. That warehouse in the Northeast is now yours. Closing documents are in process. Hex stared incredulously at the keys. Orin, that's a multi-million-dollar asset. That's your fair share, Orin said matter-of-factly. Think of it as a belated share of the profits. Without waiting for Hex to respond, the doorbell rang. Ellis stormed out of the room. It's Mr. Ross with the pizza. Delaney stood in the doorway, 3 pizza boxes in her hand and a hesitant smile on her face. Housewarming party delivery, she announced. Come on in, Orin invited. We're still organizing, but the table is set. Delaney walked in and admiringly surveyed the spacious interior. This is incredible, Orin. When you said the warehouse was remodeled, I imagined a more industrial look. Daddy designed it himself, Ellis proudly shouted from the kitchen. He even made my ceiling look like a constellation. Dinner was surprisingly cordial. Ellis dominated the conversation, describing his plans for the new room and his excitement about the river view. Hex, in turn, amused the crowd with an anecdote about his early days working with Orin. After dinner, Hex excuses himself to Ellis' room to finish some electrical work, leaving Orin, Delaney, and Ellis in the living room. Ellis is engrossed in opening his collection of science books, meticulously arranged on the shelves. He seems to be adjusting well, Delaney said softly. Orin nodded. The kids are very adaptable, and he knew it was planned. It didn't just happen. We've been talking about it for months. You're good with him, she observed, patient and focused. I just try to avoid making the mistakes I've seen, Orin replied, revealing a rare glimpse of his past experiences. Delaney seemed to understand without further explanation. From a teacher's perspective, you gave him everything he needed: stability, encouragement, boundaries. I struggle, Orin admits, and it's not always easy to know the right balance. No parent can do that, Delaney reassured with a gentle smile. We all just do the best we can and hope that's enough. Ellis approached with a book on space exploration. Mr. Ross, did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons? I don't know yet, she replied with genuine interest. That's a lot of money. Dad promised we could get a telescope on the roof terrace, Ellis continued excitedly. Maybe you could come over sometime when we use it? If you want. Delaney glanced at Orin, who nodded slightly. I'd love to, Ellis, she replied. Later, Ellis settles into her new room and Hex leaves. Orin walks Delaney to her car. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything. The testimony, the pizza, the kindness shown to Ellis during all of this." "You don't need to thank me for that," Delaney replied, her expression genuine in the soft night air. "Ellis is a great kid. And you," she hesitated, "you're a special person, Orin. A lot of people would have crumbled when it came to something like you, but you kept your dignity and composure. It's rare." Orin was silent for a moment, unaccustomed to being seen so thoroughly. "I'm not good at expressing myself," he finally admitted. "It's not natural for me." "There's no need," Delaney said gently. "You express yourself through your actions, through your loyalty, through the way you've built this new life for Ellis." She laughed. "Some people talk about love while you build it up brick by brick." She added as she got into the car, "I meant it when I said look through the binoculars. I'd love to see the moons of Jupiter sometime." Orin watched her car drive away, a strange sense of relief welling up in his chest that he hadn't felt in years. 3 months later, Bellevue Logistics Academy was fully operational. The ground floor of the warehouse was converted into a practical training base. 15 trainees traveled through the workstations under Hex's guidance. Orin observed everything from his office overlooking the training area. His attention was split between class and the quarterly profit reports from his remaining warehouses. A knock on the door interrupted him. Delaney walked in with a box of what appeared to be homemade cookies. "Thought the class might need a little sugar boost," she explained with a smile. "Ellis helped along last night when I was helping him with his science project." "You don't have to go to all that trouble," Orin said, but seeing her good intentions, his expression softened. "I know," Delaney replied simply. "I want to." Delaney has become a regular in their lives over the past few months. What began as academic support for Ellis evolved into dinners together, weekend outings, and increasingly comfortable conversations. "How is Ellis adjusting to the custody schedule?" Delaney asked. "The arrangement has stabilized and Ellis goes to Bryn's every other weekend and Wednesday night." "Better than expected," Orin replied. "And to be honest, Bryn seems to be making a real effort. She's more engaged and focused when she's with him." "What about you? How do you respond?" Delaney's questions were gentle and direct. Orin thought about it with his usual circumspection. "It's an adjustment. I never wanted to stop Ellis from seeing his mother. I just didn't want her and her family's influence to become harmful." He paused, seeing her change her ways. "It was unexpected. People are going to surprise you," Delaney notes, sometimes in a good way. Orin's cell phone rang with a text from Ellis. "Dad, I got an A+ for my solar system model. Mrs. Jensen wants to send it to the district science competition." Orin shows the message to Delaney with a rare smile on his face. "He worked on that model for weeks." "I know," Delaney laughed. "I still have glitter in my hair from when I helped him make his Saturn halo." The light-hearted moment between them was interrupted by Hex appearing in the doorway. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you, Orin." He had a strangely serious expression. "It's Nolan." Orin's expression immediately tightened. Delaney stood up. "It's time for me to deliver these cookies to the students." "Stay," Orin pleaded softly. "If you don't mind." She nodded and resumed her seat. Hex ushers Nolan into his office. Bryn's brother looks very different from the last time Orin saw him. The startup CEO's confidence disappeared, replaced by an understated demeanor and casual dress code. "Orin," Nolan greeted awkwardly. "Thanks for wanting to see me." "What do you want, Nolan?" Orin asked directly, not bothering with pleasantries. Nolan glanced uncertainly at Delaney. "Anything you want to say to me, you can say in front of her," Orin declared. Nolan nodded, then took a deep breath. "I sold the company, or what little is left after it all falls apart." "I know." Orin replied that he keeps up with the business news. Nolan, that once promising tech startup, was acquired for far less than its previous valuation. "Yes. Of course you know that." Nolan shifted uneasily. "Look, I'm not here to ask for money or help or anything. I'm just saying." "I'm sorry." The words hung in the air, apparently surprising even Nolan himself. "What exactly?" Orin presses on, not giving him an easy pass. "For everything," Nolan admitted, looking Orin really straight in the eye for the first time. "For using you as a walking ATM, for being attached to Odessa's plan, for not seeing what that did to Ellis." He swallowed hard. "I used to take things for granted, be short-sighted, and—" "It's an asshole." Orin scrutinized him silently. assessing the sincerity of the apparent shift. "What are your plans now?" he finally asked. Nolan smiled to himself. "Starting over. I got a job at a small software company in Eugene. Elementary programming, if you can believe it. Back to basics. Humility leads to progress." Orin commented, "Yeah, I'm getting a crash course education." Nolan remorsefully agrees. He hesitated, then added, "Bryn mentioned that Ellis is doing well now. You've built something good here." "Yes," Orin confirmed, glancing briefly at Delaney, which didn't escape Nolan's notice. "Okay, that's good." Nolan stood up awkwardly. "Anyway, that's what I wanted to tell you in person. And just so you know, Trent and Odessa split up. After everything came to light, their marriage didn't survive the blame game against each other." He seemed hesitant to say more, then simply summarized, "Take care, Orin." After Nolan left, Delaney turned to Orin. "That was unexpected. People do surprise you." Orin echoed her earlier words, his expression thoughtful, though not always in the way you expect. "Does that change anything for you?" she asked keenly. Hear his apology? Orin thought about it with his characteristic circumspection. "No," he said at last. "I won't forgive them for what they did to me or to Ellis. But I don't have to carry the anger anymore either." He looked out the window at the students who were studying. Building something new is more valuable than dwelling on a broken past. Delaney smiled warmly. "It's a great philosophy to live by." "I'm studying," Orin admitted, the corners of his mouth turning up slightly. That night, Ellis talked excitedly about his science project while eating dinner. Orin observed his son with quiet pride. In recent months, the boy has become more confident and less anxious about pleasing everyone around him. After dinner, they went to the rooftop terrace, where the telescope Orin had specially acquired to satisfy Ellis's interest in astronomy was set up. "Daddy," Ellis asked as they waited for the sky to darken completely, "are you happy now?" The directness of the question caused Orin to pause. He looked at Ellis, at the new life they had built together, and then answered honestly. "Yes," he said simply, "I'm happy." Ellis nodded in satisfaction. "Me too." He was watching through binoculars, making fine adjustments. "Mr. Ross makes you laugh more." Orin raises an eyebrow, surprised at the observation. "Yes. Uh-huh," Ellis confirmed with certainty. "And you listen to her ideas, not just her words." "That's important, you told me." "Yes, I did say that." Orin admits to once again finding his teachings reflected back through his son's insights. "I think she should come to our house more often," Ellis declared, still focused on the telescope. "She gets us." Without waiting for Orin to respond, the doorbell rang. "It's her coming," Ellis announced triumphantly. "I invited her to look at the moons of Jupiter with us. Is that okay?" Orin smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that altered his usually stoic countenance. "Yes, Ellis. Very much so." As Ellis ran to open the door, Orin stayed on the rooftop terrace, looking out over the river and the city in the distance. The road to this place was neither smooth nor painless, but standing here in the fading light, he felt a certainty that he had been seeking for years. He protected what was most important. He built something worth building. And, perhaps most surprisingly, he found connections worth cultivating, not out of obligation or expectation, but out of genuine understanding. When Ellis returned with Delaney, her smile was warm in the growing twilight. Orin felt the final pieces of his carefully constructed new life fall into their place. Imperfect and not without challenges, but solid, true, and his own. "Jupiter's moons are waiting," he said, pointing to the telescope. Ellis has been tracking their position all week. As the three of them gathered around the telescope, taking turns observing distant celestial bodies, it occurred to Orin that some journeys, like the light emanating from those distant satellites, take time to reach their destination. But when they finally arrive, they will illuminate everything. He no longer looks back at the shadows of the past, but focuses on the bright, hopeful light in front of him, shaped by his own hands. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.